Texas Lutheran University.
Yeah, sorry. So does anyone have any questions about the film? Yes?
How long did it take you from beginning to where it is?
So it took, we spent 18 months doing production and filming. And that would be, sometimes we'd spend like 2 weeks out of a month, sometimes it'd just be a couple days. And then it was about 6 months to edit it. So we had, I think, maybe 140 hours or something like that. And you can imagine it takes a long time to weed through everything and figure out what's going to make it in the film. So it was about 2 years in total that we worked on it. Was there another question?
Yeah.
Yes?
There was one story about the lady who took beta blockers and kind of became addicted to it, but it also said in the film that a lot of musicians do take beta blockers before they go into an audition or they perform. Is like when you take beta blockers, there's different symptoms for different people. So would that be something that you would like say would be a positive thing for some people and a negative thing for others?
I think that's actually a great way of describing it. There are people who have taken them and say, I don't like this feeling. It makes me feel like I don't have enough energy, it makes me feel kind of tired. And other people say, they're on, that graph you see where some people get too excited and have too much energy and adrenaline. So for those people where they just keep passing that optimal zone, for a lot of them, beta blockers brings it back into that area where they can now perform well. So it is interesting. We don't present it in the film, but something we found out when we were doing research for this film is that 72% of professional orchestral musicians have at least tried using beta blockers. Not that many are currently using them or use them on a regular basis, but have at least, experimented with them to see what they do for performance situations. Yeah, so that's a great point. Other questions?
How did you decide who you were going to talk to, who you're going to include in the film?
That's another great question. So when I told you about that 18 months that we spent filming, that was more like 17 months of emailing people and like 30 days of filming. It was really hard. You can imagine if someone came up to you and said, I'd like to film you, put a camera in front of you, and you just talk about all your fears and worries, and we'll just capture that for everyone to see. So it was tough. A lot of people responded and they said, this is so great you're doing this, I can't wait to see it, but I just can't talk about this on camera. These are, a lot of the people we approached had been in major orchestras for 10, 20, 30 years sometimes, and a lot of people worry about their careers. We also talked to some very high-profile musicians who, have marketing departments and tour all the time, and a lot of them shared similar sentiment of, this is great, I just can't talk about that on camera. So yeah, it was kind of, spreading a wide net to see if we could find people, but it was difficult. It certainly got easier, as you can imagine, to say, oh, we have someone in the New York Philharmonic and someone in the Houston Symphony. So then someone goes, oh, okay, well, people are talking about this. That's great. So yeah, we probably learned some things though for next time as far as recruiting people. Other questions? Yes?
As a former gospel musician yourself, what was the most important thing you learned?
Oh man, that's you guys have really good questions. So the first interview that I did was with my old teacher, who's the timpanist in the Boston Symphony. And I'd spent 4 years playing, working with this guy and looked up to him as the greatest teacher that ever lived. And one of the maybe third, fourth questions I asked him was, have you ever gotten nervous? I'd never asked him that in 4 years, working with him and seeing him in the halls all the time. And he said, yeah, of course I get nervous. And I was like, what? That's just not possible. Like, I've never seen you make a mistake. Like, you're so prepared. Every time you play, it's perfect. And he goes, well, that doesn't mean I don't get nervous. That means that I'm working really hard to play at that level. And, sometimes when you work that hard, you get nervous about it. So that to me was probably the most impactful, thing. It was like the first interview, and that's when I realized like this could mean a lot to a lot of people. Seeing their teachers or people that they respect say, I'm human, I get nervous, but here's some of the things that have really helped me. And yeah, so that was powerful and makes me curious about if I maybe, kept going or asked him, do you get nervous? That probably would have been a good idea. He said to me, he was like, I don't know why no one asked me that, because I'd be happy to tell them. It's good. Anyways, yeah, that's a great question. Any other questions? Yes?
Do you have any plans for future films like this?
We've started talking about the possibility of doing a film that addresses anxiety as a whole. People nowadays, you guys are students at a university, I'm sure you see anxiety, experience anxiety, know what it is, what it feels like. We've talked about doing a film that is for everyone and talks about anxiety in a way that we can all kind of understand it better and come to grips with it, address it, use it. But that project is pretty ambitious. I don't think we would do it unless we knew we could do a good job. We had connections to the classical music world, which is very helpful. But that's something that we've thought about. We see a lot of people who are non-musicians come up to us and say, I'm a lawyer, and every time I have to stand in front of people and litigate, like my palms get sweaty, my heart starts racing, and I really care because I don't want this person to go to jail, or I do want them to go to jail. There's a lot of pressure out there in all kinds of things that we do in daily life. So it'd be nice if there was things people could take away from this, but also maybe a film out there that could help people with those things as well. Other questions? Yes?
Yeah, what guided all of the questions that you raised and wanted to answer for this documentary, and how did that evolve through the interview process?
That's a great question. Thanks, Nick. So the question is how the questions and the things that we're going to talk about evolved. And it's a good question because when we first started this, I was really interested just in talking about beta blockers. I think they're kind of a fascinating subject. This pill that musicians use to keep calm on stage. People think it's kind of like steroids. Other people think it's performance enablers. Anyways, the conversation just around beta blockers was so interesting. But after the first 2 or 3 interviews, the questions we started to ask expanded from there because people said, yes, I've either tried beta blockers and I think they're great, or I haven't tried them and I'm doing other things. But the next thing was, but the more important question is why we need beta blockers. Like, why are we even talking about beta blockers right now? And those questions were really led by the musicians we were speaking to. They had obviously had the conversation internally about beta blockers, and then also had all these other internal conversations about what it means to perform, why I'm doing this in the first place, and sometimes, reassessing who they are as people to become better musicians. There was these giant, amazing stories behind all of this that we realized we had to explore. So we started reshaping our questions, started asking people, what other ways have you addressed your performance anxiety? People started talking about meditation and yoga and hypnosis and biofeedback machines and heart rate monitors, and I had never heard of any of those things. I'd heard of beta blockers and eating bananas and practicing more. Those are the 3 solutions, those are my options. So it was, once we started hearing that, we're like, okay, we have to tell people about this. There's so many things out there that could help. Why wouldn't we all want to know about these things? Great question. Any other questions? Another question, yes?
And to follow up for that one, is there enough research behind beta blockers to substantiate that kind of assertion that there really aren't a whole lot of negative side effects as long as you work with a physician to get the right dosage?
So I'll start with that, your first question, the follow-up. As far as we've talked, so it's strange. I'm kind of like a pseudo expert on the first 10 chapters of all of these things, but I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor. From what we've heard from the cardiologists that we spoke to, they said the research out there is that beta blockers are a fairly safe drug for people to at least try with doctor supervision. It's not chemically addictive like Valium might be, or antidepressants, or anti-anxiety medications might be. It's really meant for heart patients. So the main use of the drug is if someone has had a heart attack and the doctor's worried that they're going to have a second heart attack, you take beta blockers to keep your blood pressure down. So as far as the research out there, there's not a lot on the 10 to 20 milligram range that musicians use. But even in the higher dosages, there's not as much risk as other medications. It's not really a great context, I'm just realizing, but you should talk to a doctor if you're going to consider beta blockers. That's where I should end that. What was your second question?
Second question is, do you think that the word activation mentioned in the film should be a more normalized term for what musicians and performers experience rather than anxiety, which is more generalized?
I think we could use it in music and in performing and in daily life. I think there's so much negativity associated with the word anxiety that it's hard to think of it in any other way than this bad thing that we're trying to get rid of or cope with or hide. It's similar. I mean, the word depression is, instantly kind of makes you feel like you're being depressed, like you're being, it has these connotations with it. So I think similar with anxiety, if we can get away from having those, if we use activation, I think maybe we can start looking at it as like, could be good, could be bad. Let's aim for the good ways that this makes me feel. That's a great question. Any other questions? Yes?
Out of the people that you interviewed, did any of them talk about having generalized anxiety as well as performance anxiety?
Yes, that came up a lot. So the question was about if the people we interviewed had also experienced generalized anxiety outside of their music experiences. Absolutely, that was something that came up a lot. There were people we talked to, whether it was on camera or not, that talked about using beta blockers every day. That was, speaking of negative, outcomes, that was something where this person could not touch their instrument or do anything kind of performing, rehearsing at all without a beta blocker. I think if it becomes that, you're that dependent on it, that might be something to worry about. But yeah, a lot of people, it was not, this performance anxiety, they were not done with it and it was gone and they were free and confident. It was something that they were working on and yes, figuring out how it could kind of cross over. So one person used yoga and was finding that it was helping her with being anxious in daily life, taking time out of her day to breathe slowly and exercise. So I think that a lot of people, whether or not they were explicitly saying it, were using these things outside of their performances. Certainly if you're meditating on a daily basis, it's not just going to help your performances, it's going to help your ability to concentrate in all the things that you do. That's a great question. Another question, yes?
So would you think it's fair to say that beta blockers are similar to traditional anxiety and depression meds where antidepressants won't cure your depression, they'll just help you mentally and chemically in your brain to give you enough tools to work on yourself? Is it the same thing?
That's a good question, and again, I'm not an expert. What I can tell you is that we've had a lot of people say that they use beta blockers for a short period of time, and what they were able to do with beta blockers is know what it felt like to stand on stage and not have their hands sweat and not have their heart go crazy. So after a few times of doing this, they were like, well, now I know what it feels like to feel calm on stage. And they were able to kind of do that naturally without beta blockers anymore. Things like Valium and I'm just trying to think what they're classified as, those kinds of drugs, those address mental symptoms of anxiety and depression as well as physical. Beta blockers only address the physical side. That's why they're more easily prescribed, because they don't form those kind of connections. Yeah, I shouldn't say anymore. Talk to a doctor, but yeah, that is an interesting question and a good point. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I made an observation throughout. The theme is there's different people. One is the first and second self, empty yourself, meditation. If you only had brain, there are 9 different ways of personalities of looking at things, and the anxiety is in the 2 through 4 people, and I happen to be a 2. And about the brain, there's thinking, feeling, and doing as a way of living in the world. And nowhere by, I'm a 2, if I go to the 1, the 3, in stress, good or bad, or in growth, I never am connected to thinking. And that's why I kept failing my classes here. I'm an alumni here. So I'm so glad this is the Enneagram, E-N-N-E-A, meaning 9 gram. And most tests online do not tell you what you are because it's not asking what your motivation is. But that would be a big help in knowing yourself, because you not only know yourself, but you know everybody else, and to work in the world. There's also called Tapping Solution by Nick Ortner, and they found that veterans freeze, and when they freeze, the only way they can do is tapping. It may be like here, just something. So in anxiety, and it's very cheap to buy the book and the DVD, and then you get emails to learn more stuff.
Very cool. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. There's, I think another word or another abbreviation I've heard is EFT, where it's tapping, and people are able to, or supposedly how it works is you're able to compartmentalize and restructure where you're keeping memories, specifically traumatic memories, I don't know the specifics of it, but using tapping. We heard probably another at least 20, 25 different ways that people had addressed their performance anxiety. And some of them, it was like, I tried this and that was it, and I was done and free of it. And other people, it was these 8 things have worked really well for me. So I think that if you see some things in here that maybe speak to you and you want to try, I think that's great. There are so many other ways that people are dealing with anxiety, whether it's PTSD, generalized anxiety, stage fright. So I definitely encourage people to not be discouraged if you try something and it doesn't seem to work, or if you try 2 things, because there are lots and lots of ways out there that you can address this very normal and common issue. Any last questions before we finish?
What is your takeaway that you hope for us, for your viewers?
I think it's similar to the things that I took away from first starting this project and from talking to all these people, which is that, first I should say, a lot of times performance anxiety doesn't come at 9 or 10 years old. I was 18 years old. I thought I was the greatest percussionist in my tiny little high school. And then I went to college and saw that everyone was the greatest percussionist from their tiny little high schools, and suddenly saw my hands start to shake. I think that if you're not experiencing performance anxiety or stage fright, that's great. But if you do, or if you start to, the first thing is that you're not weird. It's completely normal. You're experiencing things and feelings that 98% of musicians have experienced. And I've talked to many musicians and orchestras who say that number is absolutely wrong. 2% of people were lying, and it's 100%, there's no doubt. I think that's the most important thing, is that, it's not strange to feel nervous before a performance. Surely because we care so much about this, it doesn't seem strange that we might feel nervous about presenting it. But that there are lots of ways to address this. And yeah, if like I said before, if something doesn't speak to you, it doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. It just means you haven't found the right thing yet. So yeah, I hope that's what you guys take away from it. And you know, I'd love to hear feedback if you guys want to email the website or on social media or anything like that. We like hearing back from people. We honestly, my wife and I made this film. We were like, if our parents watch this and give us a pat on the back, like that'll be good. So when we get to share it with a crowd of people, it's very cool. So thank you guys so much. And one last question.
Is it free to watch on the website?
Is not online just yet. We're hoping that by the fall of this year, it'll be on things like iTunes and Amazon, but all that stuff takes time, and we're just 2 people right now. But yes, that is the goal, is to get it online so people can watch it whenever they want.
Before you leave, there are 2 things. Can we take, the first thing, can we take 30 seconds to get on stage and around and get a picture? Where did Kate go? Oh, can I get you both in there? Would you mind taking a picture with all the students?
No problem.
And on the way down the stage on the floor, would you thank them for being here?
For more information, please visit tlu.edu.